Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. My next interview is with a filmmaker by the name of Eileen Thalenberg. She's just finished a film that's going to be airing on CBC March 24th, Thursday at 9 p.m. called Jihadi and the Family. And it's a film about a lot of things, actually, as Eileen and talk about. It's a film about parenting. It's a film about international development. It's a film about politics and terrorism. It's a film about mental health issues and so on. And it's a film about community. And it's really quite remarkable in that respect. It's a difficult film to watch on some levels and incredibly compelling on others. And so we follow the life of a few families where whose children have left Canada to go and pursue the life of a terrorist of one kind or another. And so Eileen and I talk about some of that and why that is. And we talk about this idea of community and what drew her to this story and what it is about, what are some of the commonalities that some of these kids had and why they headed overseas. But more importantly, what we talk about are some of the positive aspects as well that are coming up and that are sort of revealing themselves as a result of these kinds of conversations and films like these. So I think you're going to enjoy this conversation, and please check out the film Thursday, March 24th on CBC at 9 p.m. Jihadi in the Family. Welcome to Face to Face. We are joined by another special guest today, a filmmaker, a Canadian filmmaker by the name of Eileen Thalenberg. She's here to talk about her new film, Jihadi in the Family. Eileen, thank you for your time today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so, Eileen, why don't we just give us a tiny bit of context? You're a writer, you're a director, probably a producer, I would imagine.
Right.
Stormy
Nights production.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about Stormy Nights before we get into the film.
Well, Stormy Nights, we started, I don't know how many years ago, I've forgotten by now, with Gail McIntyre and I used to work at the CBC. We worked at The Nature of Things for many years. Mm-hmm. And then we went out on our own and started Stormy Nights. Started off being a company devoted to sort of high-end arts programming with a social bent. And then we started working on sort of a variety of different kinds of programs and social issues as well. We did a show on walls around the world for the anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, looking at walls in 3 democracies that have gone on up since the fall of the Berlin Wall. So we've been, around on many subjects.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've been dealing in fairly serious matters for quite some time.
Yes. Yes.
and was that something you felt compelled to do at a young age, would you say, or were you kind of converted along the way, if you will?
No, I've always been interested in social issues, but life takes you in many directions.
Of course.
Start off going one direction and something attracts you and you think, oh, that would be interesting.
So your new film, which is airing on the 24th of March in a few weeks' time, 9 p.m., Thursday, actually less than a few weeks, Thursday, March 24th, 9 p.m. Next week, we're going to get this podcast up online very soon. Lots to talk about. Watched it just a couple of days ago, and first of all, congratulations. It's... on one hand, it's very compelling. On another hand, it's hard to watch.
Yeah.
It really is. And I've got a young son, 10, and a daughter who's 8, Spencer and Victoria. And how can I, as a dad, not commiserate sort of with these women in this film, these families, these people, and the things that they're going through? And I think one of the things that really struck me was one of the experts you were interviewing might have been Daniel Kohler, the German scholar.
Right.
I think he said something to the effect of, ISIS, these are common, quote, common everyday people.
That's right.
So this, and can you talk a little bit about that's you don't normally think of a terrorist as being somebody who's like you,
No.
or like me, right?
Well, I think they're kids that are looking, it's that age around 18 to 21 when you start questioning society around you, you start questioning the values of your parents and society in general, and you're looking for something that has meaning, right? And here comes this organization, this ISIS, that tells you you can be part of something really great. You can work for social justice. You can work with honor and dignity, defending women, children who are being abused by Bashar al-Assad. You can create a new society where people will be treated equally and have a place in society. Doesn't that sound like an invitation?
It really does, yeah.
And then once you get there, you realize what the reality is, and it's too late, and you can't leave. So, and the parents are the ones that get sort of left in the lurch because they are left in this society with everybody looking at them saying, "Look at them! They must have done something wrong. They must be, a hotbed of something going on in their family that sent this child out to become a terrorist."
Well, at one point there was a part of me. Well, the main character is it Christianne? Is that her name?
Christianne, yeah.
Yeah, Christianne Boudreau. Is that it? Yeah, and her son is really the main sort of character throughout the film, and you tell her story very well and in a very compelling way. But she ultimately ends up moving because she's seen as being the mother of a terrorist.
Right, especially in Canada.
Right.
That has become a problem. She is the only woman, the only parent that has spoken out about the issue and come forward. When we were looking for other families to speak, nobody would come forward. Even their people, their neighbors, their other parts of their family don't know that their child has gone overseas. And we don't have a huge issue in Canada. We're talking about 100 people or so that have gone over to join ISIS, or to, not necessarily ISIS, but have gone over to Iraq and Syria.
Right.
So, and our society is really not very tolerant of these families. And in a way, they're not helpful. They don't see them as a possibility of, of helping these families and helping future families.
As a filmmaker, when you go into it, I'm not sure, maybe you can talk about this a little bit, but how you were sort of introduced to the subject, why you felt compelled, why you felt that you needed to make this film. Do you go in with a sense of, we want some solutions that are coming out of this. We're hoping some teachers are going to write some curriculum out of this, or maybe an organization's going to pick this up and run with some of the findings that we're presenting them here on the CBC on March the 24th. Do you go in with that practical sort of?
No, I don't go in with that. I go in with what's going on here.
Right.
What's going on here? And the question was, we were seeing such a rhetoric of Islamophobia in this country.
Right.
And people saying those people, and all of a sudden we were pointing fingers, and it felt like such a dangerous thing in our democracy to have happen, because if it happens to one group, it can happen to another group.
Sure.
So we went in thinking, well, is there a real problem, and where is it coming from? Who are these kids? Who are these families? And why is it happening? And that's what we went in with to find. And we found the same story all over the world. We were in Europe and various places where mothers and families are much more outspoken than here.
Right.
And that's what gave Christianne the courage to speak out as well when she saw that it was possible to speak out and be helpful to others, because she then became the network and will continue being a network point person, because she'll do it online, she'll do it by phone from wherever she is. But and people call her and say, there's something strange going on with my son. Should I be worried? Or my daughter is starting to do this. Is this a worrisome sign? At which point is it worrisome? And she was trained by Daniel Kohler to be a caseworker.
Right. looking for telltale signs.
Looking for telltale signs, but not overreacting, right?
Right.
Because some of these signs are just, kids trying things out, but not really.
No, exactly, and it's tough to know. Like on one sense, you had another academic who said, and I thought it was really interesting when I think the line was something to the effect of, when it comes to radicalization, there really is no profile. And again, we get back to this whole idea that we're just sort of all the same, really. I mean, we're all human beings. We all want to belong. We're all looking for a sense of meaning of one kind or another. But then I think he went on to say, but hang on a second here. There's lots of young people around the world, who don't end up going to Syria to join ISIS, right?
Right.
So there
is something going on in these people's lives.
Yes.
And very often it's a feeling of alienation. It's a feeling of being bullied, a feeling of frustration, of looking at racism. Sometimes they're from broken families. And, it's a real recipe for someone to start looking abroad for other answers. And then when ISIS comes along and gives you a narrative that's going to help you deal with these issues, and give you literally a recipe of how to be,
A recipe of how to be.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Here is your recipe.
Yeah.
You're going to become, if you're not a Muslim, you can convert. If you're a Muslim, you'll become even more religious, more observant. And here are what you do. Every morning you do this, and then you do this, and you don't have to think anymore. You don't question anymore. And these are the telltale signs that parents have to watch for. Excuse me. This increase of intolerance of other forms of religion.
Right.
Becoming more aggressively strict. The rejection of non-Muslims, even the rejection of certain parts of, the Shias versus the Sunnis.
Right, right.
Everybody, there is always an other that shouldn't be, that is the enemy. They change their group of friends. They cut off ties with other family members. They become obsessed with, Islam's fight against the West because Islam has been, is the underdog right now. And violence maybe is the only solution to fight, to destroy what they see as evil. It starts very gently and then becomes more and more.
It's a gradual sort of maturation almost.
Yeah, but it happens quite quickly. Very often it's within, we're talking within a month or 2, 3 months max. They're gone.
Yes. Yes, I found what Daniel Kohler said, that typically it's very fast when it comes to religious radicalization.
Yeah.
It's really interesting distinction where he talked about neo-Nazis. He said this is something that takes a long time. This has to get ingrained and take root and so on. I found it really. Damian is Christianne's son, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, Damian. So I found it really interesting when you interviewed the imam. Just before that, she had talked about how he was looking for some kind of meaning and how he found meaning in Islam. And then the imam, who was lovely, talked about him being well-rounded and the philosopher, but he started to see this feeling of disconnection.
Right.
Starting to and I thought I actually got and I'm getting a shiver now. Actually, I think when he said he was, this is my paraphrase, but he essentially said something to the effect of he was just trying to find his way home.
Yeah.
Like he was just trying to find a place to rest his head.
Right.
At the risk of sounding corny.
Yeah.
And then he gets. And then I was blown away by the sophistication of some of the shots you had of some of the advertising.
Oh, isn't that amazing?
It's crazy.
If you go on the CBC website, we put some extra material on.
Oh, I'll make sure I link to that in your bio. Yeah, good.
There's a psychiatrist from Montreal. Her name is Cécile Rousseau. She works with traumatized children from war and also with other social issues. And she talks about how ISIS is using the weapons that the West has sent into the world, Hollywood heroes and video games. And that confluence is what comes out in these videos. It's so, with those songs,
Right. Yes.
They're almost religious songs that have been used. They're called nasheeds in the Muslim tradition, and they're kind of this kind of chanting that comes out that calls the young people. I remember one of the mothers was watching them, and she started crying. She said, "I can't see this anymore. I can't bear that they're using that to recruit."
Right. It must be so hard as a mother to be reflecting, mother. I also want to ask you about that. Maybe this is a nice little segue in, but just the almost the unbelief, the inability to come to terms with this is what my son or my daughter has chosen to do.
Yeah.
How did they get there? How come I didn't see it? Where did I go wrong? All of those sort of questions driven by I am, by the prefix of I am not.
Right.
Right? And I wasn't a good parent. I wasn't worthy. I wasn't all these things. It's just it's quite tragic, and yet really, I think, telling on a whole other level as well.
Yeah. Well, Daniel Kohler says the first thing he tells parents is not your fault. It isn't your fault.
Right.
But I think a lot of it happened before people were aware of what was going on.
Right.
And in fact, in Europe, one of the mothers says that governments turned a blind eye to things. They said, kids want to go, let them go, get them out of the country.
Right.
Did nothing to stop them. And so these parents were like the first guinea pigs. Now, as people are becoming more and more aware of the signs, it's possible, if they weren't penalized, if they weren't stigmatized, to stop some of these kids beforehand. Because we now know a little bit more about the signs. But what happens is when the parent sees something going on with their kid, who do they turn to?
Right.
Who do they turn to? There was a story in Calgary of one parent noticed that his kid was starting to talk about leaving home, had a ticket to go to London, maybe go overseas, and he got really frightened, so he called the RCMP.
Right.
Kid gets arrested. Family's then torn apart. The Crown asks for life in prison for this kid who's barely a teenager, and the parents feel guilty for having gotten their child into trouble instead of helping the parents and giving them tools and giving them backup and social means to deal with their kids, and for other people to intervene as well, not in a justice system, but as a social problem. And there are places in this world that they are doing that. They are supporting the families, they're supporting the kids, they're working through education, working through work projects, and helping at the same time monitoring what's going on.
It kind of makes you wonder, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And then I want to ask you a question about the mothers. But what, if not Islam, or if not radical Islam, if not ISIS, if not Syria, what else would these young men and women have turned to?
Well,
might there have been something else?
Well, what are we offering in our society?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, as you know, not everybody, doesn't find meaning in our society, but why don't they feel like they have a place to do, quote, their jihad in their own country?
Right.
Excuse me. And jihad means to actually, meaning to do something useful in one's country, to help.
Right.
And many of the mothers say that, here in this country, why don't they participate in some way of changing this society if it feels like they don't belong here? And do we make room for them to speak about these things? That's another question.
Yeah, almost opportunities to voice their opinions, to be themselves,
to be heard,
to be heard. Well, that's what struck me when the imam said, here's this well-rounded philosopher type who's just looking for connection, looking for a place to call home. And the question for me is, why wasn't he feeling that here in the first place? What was it about the lack of community, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And the other...
Yeah, go. Yeah.
I was also thinking about this fellow Murad Ben Jalali.
Yes, yeah.
We tried... we set up a whole week of filming here in Canada because he's an ex-Guantanamo detainee who got lured to Afghanistan, and once he got there, realized he didn't want to be there, but he couldn't get out. And when he tried to get out, it was 9/11, and the borders were closed.
Right.
And he got swept up and got sent to Guantanamo, got repatriated to France, and has been an outspoken person in the field of counter-radicalization. He speaks to young people, not trying to convince them, but just telling him his own experience and how he sees things and what he did to his family as a result of that. We tried to bring him to Canada and have the assurance of the RCMP and everybody he could come in. There was no problem. We brought him in via Iceland so he wouldn't fly over the United States because he's on their no-fly list, and he arrives at Pearson Airport and gets put into maximum security prison.
Wow.
And after we tried, we had a human rights lawyer, Barbara Jackman, who helped us get him out and sent back to France. This is a person who is a voice that needs to be heard and can be used for good, and that's what we did in this country. We barred him from coming in. We not only barred him, but we arrested him.
We put him in jail.
Yeah, in maximum security. So, the voices that we need to hear are the voices that we're banishing.
He's gone on to write a book about his experience as well.
Yes.
I found when he was being interviewed, I found it pretty interesting. He gave me the sense that he was really, and I didn't think he was trying to pull the wool over my eyes at all, but he gave me the sense that he was deceived. That he, it sounded like a bit of an adventure. I'm going to go and help in some way, like you said. I'm going to, the more sort of literal translation of jihad. I'm going to go and do something practical and my struggle for survival, right, continues, and I'm going to do that.
And he'd never been out of France. He'd never been out of his neighborhood. It was his brother said, "Go and see what a Muslim country is like. My friends will take care of you." And the friends ended up taking him to a training camp. And he goes, "What am I doing here?" And several of his people, wanted to leave, and they said, "You have to stay here for 60 days." They took their passports away, and the day that the 60 days were up, he had his ticket to come back home, and that was 9/11.
Right.
Borders closed.
Wow, in the blink of an eye. In
the blink of an eye, your life changes. His parents were put into prison because of him. They were sent to Algeria, where they were born, even though they were French subjects, and can never come back to France. And as he said, he will never forgive himself what he did to his parents.
What he did to his parents. It's really interesting to hear his story because we don't get Damian's story except through the eyes of others through his mother and so on our own sort of perspective and our own kind of take, based on what we hear. But it's really interesting to see him almost out of respect for his parents say, this is his way of sort of appeasing the gods, if you will.
Yeah.
Was it a conscious choice to interview largely, in fact, I think only mothers?
Well, it happened that way. There are very few fathers that come forward. We had one father that, when we were in Brussels, there was a meeting of all these mothers.
Yes.
Mothers for Life group. And one father from Italy said he arrived right at the end of he said, I want to be there too, because I need to be there. We just didn't have room to include him.
Right.
And his story is quite touching because his son converted to Islam, went over, and just before he died, I think he was wounded, and as he was dying, he said to his friend, tell my father that I wish him to convert to Islam so we can meet in paradise.
Wow.
And so wouldn't you know that this Catholic father, when he got the call from his son's friend converted to Islam and prays 5 times a day just to be close to his son. I mean, these are painful stories.
Oh, yeah, very painful.
You know,
yeah.
You can just feel I mean, that was the really difficult part of making this film.
Yeah, I bet.
The mother, being with women who, at one point they thought their child was alive. Within a week we've heard that their child had just been killed, or
right.
It just goes on.
Well, and there was one woman, I think might have been a woman with whose daughter had sort of disappeared. I think she went on kind of a trek to find her.
That's right.
And talked about the needle in the haystack. And
right.
I'm telling you, I'm getting it again. Shiver up the spine, yeah. Eileen. I would be on the plane. I'd be packing my bags.
Yeah.
I really would.
And then where do you look for them?
And where do you even begin? I mean,
exactly.
Talk about being a responsible parent.
Right.
At what point do you say my search is over?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever feel that there was something not simple that was going on here, but that you kind of had a revelation, kind of something bubbled to the surface, and you said, "Wow, you know what? This is about this is a mental health issue, or it is about bullying. There's a I guess there was a theme maybe. Did anything sort of bubble?
It's so. I mean, there are groups of ideas,
sure,
groups of people that you can say this is the reason and that's the reason, but it's I think you have to approach it almost individually.
Sure.
Look at the situation, just like with mental health. You see what's going on in the family, what's going on with the kid, with the child, and go from there. But I don't know. A lot we found that it's not necessarily always true, but there were a lot of kids that had mental health issues.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There was a couple of mothers who had autistic kids.
Right.
Doesn't mean that all autistic kids are going to go and
yeah, of course,
and join ISIS, but there was, and you start understanding, autistic kids like sort of rote things, so it makes sense that, they would be attracted to something that tells them what to do, at different times of the day or so on. And others had come from broken homes.
Right.
There's something that points to missing fathers. And I think that's the same thing when you look at gangs.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually there's something going on, not that you blame anyone, but there's a missing father or a broken home that somehow propels the kid or doesn't give the kid a firm rooting.
Sure.
But, again, there are lots of single parent families where that doesn't happen. But
of course, yeah. No, I guess...
you can start pointing, but you can start seeing certain patterns, and there are researchers that are trying to find a commonality.
I would imagine that's true. I think of the imam's comment about home,
yeah.
and the foundation of what that means, and it means
right.
something different to everyone. And
right.
in every culture that I've been in, everybody's idea of home is largely the same, I suppose, but we have different iterations of it, right? We create it in different ways. Yeah, and obviously I'm not interested at all in pointing fingers. Responsibility, I guess, is important, but really, how do you avoid this kind of thing in the future, right? That's kind of where I'm going with it, I suppose. For me, isn't it really about dialogue and conversation
exactly.
and being open, whatever, maybe around the dinner table, at Sunday school, in the public, in grade school, university classroom, etc.
Exactly. It was interesting. Daniel Kohler had an example that he gave when we were talking to him. He said there was a family where their kid had become became more religious. It was a Muslim family,
mm-hmm.
and the kid had become more religious and decided to get married at the age of 15. Because they believe in young marriages, and so the parents were freaked out.
Yeah.
Because they saw this as a way that the kids were going to go overseas together and all this. And Daniel Kohler's suggestion is, don't freak out. Invite the other parents for a big party.
Right.
Make a celebration of it. Surround them by family. Surround them by other people that are important in life.
Yeah.
It's a cushioning. And
yeah.
It's a way.
include them. Don't
them.
exclude them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And what you do is you start strengthening the bonds that way. The bonds of family, the bonds of community, and so on. And you don't bring anyone to go and preach to them at this point. But you keep the dialogue open. I thought that was such a...
It's brilliant. I mean, aren't we all broken in our own way?
Yeah,
and aren't we all trying to find our way home in some way?
Yeah,
and some of us just do it in a more radical way than others.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way I see it. And I mean, I continue to marvel at this, and I think, as a development worker who Cambodia, preferred country of choice to work in, it's about creating solid communities.
Mm-hmm.
It's about ground up. Yes, it's top down, and you need legislation, and you need laws, and you need taxing and all those things, taxation and so on. But you also need this foundation, this grassroots kind of development. So I don't know. Are they going to meet in the middle? I guess, but there's got to be some crossover somewhere, But there is healing in community.
Yeah.
I love the fact that he says, invite the other parents over, have them over for dinner.
Yeah, make a celebration, invite an imam to bless the wedding, but not to talk to them.
Yeah.
About anything, But what happens also in our society is that when we see the signs of what's going on, we become more and more repressive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And punitive, and the shift to the right, and that's what was,
Well, and as you point out in the film, that's kind of what these groups are hoping we're going to do.
Absolutely. They say, you see?
It just becomes self-fulfilling in some regards.
Yeah.
Eileen, what's your hope? What's next? It's going to appear next Thursday on TV. Obviously, there's going to be a rebroadcast. It's going to be on the website, CBC's website. Are you hoping this is going to get into schools?
It's already. We've had some requests. Second week of April. I've been invited to Montreal to show the film in 4 different cégeps. There's a big conference going on in Montreal called Living Together, and so I'll be showing it at the community at cégeps, 4 different cégeps, both English and French. And we've had some interest, actually, from the American State Department. Their Center for Counter-Terrorism is interested in the film as well.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So we hope that it'll have some legs and, have people thinking about things.
Well, I hope.
As opposed to preaching to them.
I trust it will too. I think it will. I think it's going to be a timely subject for many years to come. And I think there's a lot more going on here. This isn't just a film about terrorism.
No.
There's a lot going on here. This is about brokenness and mental health issues and and as we've just discussed, about community.
Right.
Eileen, thank you so much for your time today, and congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
A Jihadi in the Family, airing on the CBC News Network, March. Hang on, is it?
Not News Network.
No, I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong. Where is it? Thursday, March 24th.
On CBC.
On CBC at 9 p.m. Thank you again for your time today.